The trembling in her hands was unmistakable, as Emma Rodriguez gripped the Sig Sauer P320, for what everyone believed was her first time. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cool morning air at the Quantico Marine Corps Base shooting range. Her stance was all wrong, her breathing erratic, and her aim so poor that even the paper target 15 yards away seemed impossibly distant. The Navy SEAL instructors exchanged knowing glances and suppressed their sighs. Another corporate executive's daughter playing weekend warrior, they assumed. Another rich girl whose daddy bought her way into an elite civilian marksmanship program, designed for law enforcement and military personnel. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. What they didn't know was that Emma Rodriguez had once been the most feared sniper in a conflict zone 8,000 miles away, where missing your target meant watching your team die. They had no idea that her trembling hands weren't from nervousness, but from muscle memory trying to surface through 3 years of carefully constructed amnesia. The woman they saw as a liability had once held the record for the longest confirmed kill in modern warfare, a shot that saved an entire forward operating base from being overrun. But today she would let them believe she was just another civilian learning to shoot. At least until circumstances forced her to remember who she really was. The Quantico Advanced Marksmanship Program existed in a world where credentials meant everything, and assumptions ruled supreme. Nestled within the sprawling Marine Corps Base in Virginia, the facility attracted the military's finest marksmen alongside carefully selected civilians who paid premium prices for elite training. The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine firing ranges, where the sound of precision gunfire had become as routine as breathing. This was hallowed ground where legends were born and reputations forged in cordite and steel. Emma Rodriguez appeared utterly out of place in this temple of tactical excellence. At 28 years old, she possessed the kind of understated beauty that made people look twice, though never for the reasons she preferred. Her long black hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail that did nothing to hide the nervousness in her dark brown eyes. Designer workout clothes that clearly cost more than most people's monthly salaries marked her as civilian money, the kind of participant who enrolled more for bragging rights than genuine skill development. The registration paperwork told a simple story that everyone accepted without question. Emma Rodriguez, marketing executive from Arlington, Virginia. Emergency contact listed her father as Miguel Rodriguez, CEO of Rodriguez Defense Contracting, a company that supplied non-lethal equipment to military installations worldwide. Her motivation for attending the program was documented as personal protection and sporting interest, the kind of generic response that suggested someone with more money than sense. What the paperwork didn't mention was the small scar hidden beneath her hairline, the result of shrapnel that had nearly ended her life in a place whose name she could never speak aloud. It didn't document the nights when she woke up in cold sweats, hearing the whistle of incoming mortars that existed only in her fractured memory. The forms made no reference to the prescription bottles hidden in her bathroom cabinet, medications designed to keep the ghosts of her past from overwhelming her present. The Advanced Marksmanship Program drew participants from across the spectrum of American society, but the military personnel who attended carried themselves with unmistakable bearing. Staff Sergeant Michael Chen arrived each morning with the precision of a Swiss chronometer, his uniform pressed to razor sharpness and his equipment arranged with obsessive attention to detail. His reputation as a scout sniper instructor preceded him like a warning shot across the bow of mediocrity. Lieutenant Colonel James Morrison commanded respect simply by existing in the same space as others. 23 years of service had carved lines of authority into his weathered face, and his eyes held the 1,000-yard stare of someone who had seen combat in places that didn't officially exist on any map. The Distinguished Service Cross on his chest spoke to heroism under fire, while the subtle scarring on his hands suggested intimate familiarity with violence and its consequences. Chief Petty Officer David Torres brought Navy SEAL pedigree to the instructor cadre, his muscled frame and quiet intensity making civilian participants unconsciously step aside when he passed. His teaching methods blended scientific precision with battlefield experience, creating learning environments that pushed students beyond their perceived limitations. The silver dolphins on his uniform marked him as one of the few, the proud, the deadly. Among the civilian participants, Emma found herself grouped with an eclectic collection of law enforcement officers, private security contractors and wealthy enthusiasts seeking advanced tactical training. Detective Lisa Park from the Metropolitan Police Department carried herself with the confident swagger of someone accustomed to danger, her service weapon worn with the casual familiarity of a favorite piece of jewelry. Her sharp eyes constantly assessed threats and opportunities, never quite relaxing even in the controlled environment of the training facility. Marcus Webb represented the private military contractor demographic, his expensive tactical gear and casual references to overseas deployments marking him as someone who monetized military experience in corporate settings. His stories of providing security for diplomatic convoys and high-value targets impressed the other civilians, though something in his demeanor suggested his actual combat experience might be less extensive than his carefully crafted persona implied. Jennifer Kim arrived each day carrying the latest in precision rifle equipment, her custom-built weapons system costing more than most people's cars. As a competitive shooter with national rankings, she expected the military instructors to treat her as a peer rather than a student. Her confidence bordered on arrogance, though her skills on the firing line generally supported her elevated opinion of her abilities. The first day of training began with equipment inspection and safety briefings that Emma approached with the tentative curiosity of someone genuinely unfamiliar with military protocol. Her questions seemed basic to the point of embarrassment, asking about proper handling procedures and requesting clarification on terminology that any experienced shooter would understand instinctively. The instructors exchanged patient but exasperated glances as they explained concepts that should have been elementary for anyone serious about firearms training. Staff Sergeant Chen demonstrated proper stance and grip technique with the methodical precision of someone who had taught thousands of students the fundamentals of marksmanship. Emma's attempts to mirror his positioning resulted in awkward, unstable positions that drew gentle corrections and increasingly strained patience from the instructional staff. Her grip strength seemed insufficient for proper weapon control, and her stance suggested someone fighting against natural instincts rather than developing proper technique. The morning progressed with dry fire exercises designed to develop muscle memory and trigger control without the distraction of actual ammunition. Emma's performance during these foundational drills reinforced every assumption about her limited capability. Her breathing was irregular, her trigger finger placement inconsistent, and her sight alignment so poor that the instructors wondered privately whether she might need vision correction before continuing with live fire exercise. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison observed the training evolution from a position that allowed him to monitor all participants simultaneously. His practiced eye quickly identified the natural shooters, the hard workers who might develop competence through dedication, and the hopeless cases who would struggle to achieve basic safety standards. Emma Rodriguez clearly fell into the latter category, her performance suggesting someone who might benefit more from basic civilian shooting courses than advanced military marksmanship training. During the lunch break, conversations among the instructors revealed their growing concerns about Emma's presence in the program. The advanced curriculum assumed a foundation of basic competence that she clearly lacked, and her continued participation threatened to slow the pace of instruction for more capable students. The financial considerations of her enrollment complicated matters, as her father's defense contracting company represented a significant source of revenue for the base's civilian program. The afternoon session introduced live ammunition for the first time, transforming the sterile environment of dry fire practice into something altogether more serious. The crack of gunfire echoed across the ranges as participants engaged targets at varying distances, their performance measured by electronic scoring systems that provided immediate feedback on accuracy and consistency. The smell of burned gunpowder mixed with the metallic tang of brass casings created an atmosphere that separated the genuinely committed from the merely curious. Emma's first shots with live ammunition confirmed every negative assessment made during the morning's dry fire exercise. Her groupings were scattered across the target like a shotgun pattern, with several rounds missing the paper entirely and striking the earthen backstop behind. The electronic scoring system registered hits so far from the center ring that achieving basic marksmanship qualification seemed like an impossibly distant goal. Staff Sergeant Chen approached Emma's firing position with the patient demeanor of someone accustomed to working with struggling students. His corrections focused on fundamental issues that should have been resolved during basic training, suggesting that her claimed experience with firearms might be even more limited than initially suspected. The gentle guidance he provided reflected years of instructional experience, though his subtle body language suggested growing frustration with her apparent inability to implement even basic improvement. The other participants began to take notice of Emma's struggles, their reactions ranging from sympathetic encouragement to barely concealed annoyance at the additional attention she required from the instructional staff. Detective Park offered friendly advice between firing iterations, sharing techniques that had helped her during police academy training. Her suggestions were well-intentioned but seemed to overwhelm Emma rather than provide meaningful assistance. Marcus Webb's response to Emma's difficulties revealed aspects of his personality that reflected poorly on his professional background. His comments about women in tactical environments carried subtle condescension masked as helpful observation, suggesting that some people might be better suited to different recreational activity. The instructor's failure to address these remarks directly created an uncomfortable dynamic that Emma absorbed without visible reaction. Jennifer Kim's competitive nature manifested as impatience with slower learners, who threatened to reduce the challenge level of advanced exercise. Her whispered comments to other participants about lowered standards and participation trophies created social pressure that would have devastated less resilient individuals. Emma's apparent obliviousness to these criticisms suggested either remarkable emotional armor or complete focus on her own performance issue. As the first day concluded with equipment cleaning and administrative requirements, Emma's performance statistics painted a concerning picture of her readiness for advanced training. Her accuracy scores ranked below even generous qualification standards, while her consistency metrics suggested fundamental issues with technique that might require extensive remedial instruction. The gap between her capabilities and program expectations seemed insurmountable without significant additional investment of time and resources. The instructor's end-of-day debrief included frank discussions about Emma's future in the program. Staff Sergeant Chen advocated for recommending her transfer to basic civilian shooting courses that would provide more appropriate instruction for her skill level. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison expressed concerns about safety implications of continuing with a participant who demonstrated such poor weapon handling fundamentals. Chief Petty Officer Torres suggested that her apparent nervousness around firearms might indicate psychological issues that required professional evaluation before continuing. The conversation revealed institutional biases that influenced their assessment of Emma's potential. Her civilian background and apparent wealth created assumptions about her motivation and commitment that might not have applied to military personnel or law enforcement participants. The instructor's experience with similar participants, who enrolled for novelty rather than genuine skill development, colored their evaluation of her dedication and trainability. Emma's departure from the facility that evening appeared to reinforce every assumption about her temporary interest in advanced marksmanship training. Her expensive vehicle and carefully maintained appearance suggested someone playing at military training rather than seriously pursuing tactical competence. The instructors watched her leave with the resigned acceptance of professionals who recognized when their expertise was being wasted on inappropriate students. What none of them observed was the subtle transformation that occurred once Emma believed herself unobserved. Her carefully maintained civilian demeanor shifted almost imperceptibly as she approached her vehicle, her posture straightening and her movements acquiring the fluid efficiency of someone whose muscle memory retained lessons learned in far more dangerous circumstances. The trembling in her hands stopped completely, replaced by the steady control of someone who had once placed shots with precision that defied human limitations. The drive home provided Emma with unwelcome time to process the day's emotional challenges. Returning to the world of firearms and tactical training had awakened memories she had spent 3 years trying to suppress, fragments of experiences that her damaged psyche protected through selective amnesia. The familiar weight of a weapon in her hands triggered flashbacks that she fought to contain, images of desert landscapes and desperate firefights that existed at the edges of her conscious awareness. Her apartment in Arlington reflected the careful construction of a new identity built upon the ruins of a previous life. The corporate marketing materials scattered across her desk provided props for maintaining her civilian cover, while prescription medications hidden in her bathroom cabinet managed the psychological aftermath of trauma she could never fully discuss. The framed photographs displayed throughout her living space showed family gatherings and social events that created a narrative of normalcy for anyone who might investigate her background. The evening news carried reports of ongoing conflicts in regions where Emma's presence had once made the difference between victory and catastrophe. Her reaction to these stories suggested more than casual interest in international affairs, though she maintained the detached perspective expected of someone whose involvement in such matters remained purely theoretical. The careful neutrality of her responses had been practiced and refined over years of maintaining operational security through misdirection. Sleep brought no relief from the memories that firearms training had awakened. Her dreams carried her back to mountainous terrain where every shadow might conceal an enemy sniper, where the crack of a rifle shot meant the difference between completing the mission and watching teammates die. The precision required for long-range shooting and combat conditions bore little resemblance to the controlled environment of military training ranges, though both demanded skills that Emma's conscious mind insisted she had never possessed. The second day of training began with Emma's return to the facility, her apparent determination to continue despite the previous day's struggles suggesting either admirable persistence or stubborn refusal to acknowledge her limitation. The instructors prepared for another day of remedial instruction, their lesson plans modified to accommodate her apparent need for extensive basic guidance. The other participants' reactions ranged from patient acceptance to poorly concealed irritation at the expected impact on their own training progression. Morning exercises focused on zeroing rifles to ensure accurate point of impact at known distances, a fundamental requirement that preceded any meaningful marksmanship training. Emma's attempts to adjust her rifle's sights resulted in erratic groupings that suggested she was fighting the weapon rather than working with it. The electronic scoring system registered improvements so marginal that they might have reflected random chance rather than genuine skill development. Staff Sergeant Chen's patience began showing signs of strain as Emma's continued struggles threatened to derail the entire morning's training schedule. His corrections became more direct and less diplomatically phrased, reflecting frustration with her apparent inability to implement basic adjustments to her shooting technique. The other participants noticed the shift in his demeanor, creating social tension that made Emma's isolation more pronounced. The introduction of timed shooting exercises revealed additional dimensions of Emma's apparent inadequacy for advanced marksmanship training. Her slow, deliberate shot placements suggested someone uncomfortable with weapons handling under any form of pressure, while her accuracy declined precipitously when required to engage targets within specified time limits. The combination of poor technique and slow execution created performance metrics that questioned her suitability for any form of tactical training. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison's growing frustration manifested in increasingly pointed questions about Emma's background and motivation for attending the program. His queries about her previous firearms experience and training goals seemed designed to identify graceful exit strategies that would preserve everyone's dignity while acknowledging the mismatch between her capabilities and program requirements. Emma's responses maintained the nervous uncertainty that had characterized her performance since enrollment, providing no indication of hidden competence waiting to emerge. The morning's low point occurred during transition drills designed to develop speed and accuracy when moving between multiple targets. Emma's attempts to engage successive targets resulted in scattered shots that missed not only the intended points of impact but frequently the targets themselves. Her movement between firing positions was awkward and tentative, suggesting someone unfamiliar with basic tactical concepts that formed the foundation of advanced training. Chief Petty Officer Torres observed Emma's struggles with the clinical detachment of someone evaluating tactical capabilities under operational conditions. His assessment focused on fundamental issues that would prevent effective performance in any high-stress environment, where marksmanship skills might mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The gap between her apparent abilities and the program's minimum standards seemed to widen with each exercise rather than narrow through instruction and practice.
The lunch break provided an opportunity for informal conversations that revealed the extent to which Emma's presence had become a source of frustration for other participants. Detective Park's initial sympathy had evolved into concern about safety implications of training alongside someone with such limited weapons handling competence. Marcus Webb's criticism became more direct and less diplomatically expressed, questioning the wisdom of lowering standards to accommodate inappropriate participants. Jennifer Kim's competitive instincts, manifested as barely concealed contempt for Emma's continued presence in advanced training designed for competent shooters. Her comments about participation trophies and lowered standards created social pressure intended to encourage voluntary withdrawal from the program. The lack of institutional response to these remarks suggested that the instructors shared similar concerns about Emma's impact on overall training effectiveness. The afternoon session introduced precision shooting at extended ranges, distances where minor errors in technique became magnified into significant misses on target. Emma's performance at these longer ranges confirmed every negative assessment of her fundamental skills, with groupings so scattered that identifying consistent error patterns became impossible. The advanced optics and precision ammunition provided to all participants seemed wasted on someone incapable of achieving basic accuracy standards.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Staff Sergeant Chen's instruction became increasingly mechanical, as he repeated fundamental concepts that Emma seemed unable to grasp or implement effectively. His professional demeanor maintained courtesy, while his body language clearly communicated frustration with her continued struggles. The time devoted to individual instruction for Emma reduced the attention available for other participants who might benefit more substantially from advanced guidance. The day's most revealing moment occurred during individual coaching sessions where Emma worked one-on-one with Lieutenant Colonel Morrison on basic marksmanship fundamentals. Her questions seemed designed to establish her complete unfamiliarity with concepts that any serious shooter would understand instinctively. Her grip strength appeared insufficient for proper weapon control, while her stance suggested someone fighting against natural instincts rather than developing proper technique. Morrison's analysis of Emma's performance focused on fundamental deficiencies that would require extensive remedial training to address. Her breathing control was erratic, her trigger finger placement inconsistent, and her sight alignment so poor that achieving basic qualification standards seemed unlikely within the program's time frame. His recommendation for her transfer to introductory civilian courses reflected professional judgment rather than personal animosity. The electronic scoring systems that monitored all participants' performance created objective documentation of Emma's struggles throughout the second day of training. Her accuracy statistics remained consistently below acceptable minimums, while her precision metrics showed no meaningful improvement. Despite intensive individual instruction, the data suggested someone fundamentally unsuited for advanced marksmanship training regardless of motivation or effort. As the second day concluded, conversations among the instructors revealed growing consensus about Emma's future in the program. The safety implications of her continued participation concerned all three professional instructors, while the impact on other participants' training progression threatened the program's overall effectiveness. The financial considerations of her enrollment complicated administrative decisions, though professional standards ultimately took precedence over economic factors. Emma's departure that evening occurred under a cloud of institutional disappointment and peer disapproval that would have devastated most individuals. Her apparent obliviousness to these social pressures suggested either remarkable emotional resilience or complete disconnection from the group dynamics surrounding her participation. The instructors watched her leave with resignation tinged by relief that safety concerns had not materialized into actual incidents. The transformation that occurred once Emma believed herself unobserved was more pronounced after the second day's emotional challenge. Her civilian facade dissolved completely as she approached her vehicle, revealing posture and movement patterns that contradicted everything the instructors believed about her capability. The steady control that replaced her apparent nervousness suggested muscle memory that retained lessons learned under conditions far more demanding than any training environment. Her evening routine included activities that would have surprised anyone who had observed her struggles on the firing line. The precision with which she maintained her personal firearms contradicted her apparent unfamiliarity with basic weapons handling, while her physical fitness regimen suggested someone maintaining capabilities developed for purposes that extended far beyond recreational shooting. The careful compartmentalization of her dual existence required constant vigilance to maintain operational security. The third day arrived with institutional pressure building toward a resolution of Emma's problematic participation in the advanced marksmanship program. The instructors had consulted with program administrators about appropriate procedures for addressing her apparent inadequacy, while other participants had begun voicing concerns about reduced training quality and potential safety hazard. The weight of these accumulated pressures created an atmosphere where Emma's continued enrollment had become untenable. Morning exercises began with advanced shooting positions designed to challenge competent marksmen, while developing tactical flexibility under field conditions. Emma's attempts to engage targets from prone, kneeling, and standing positions resulted in performance so poor that the instructors questioned whether she possessed the physical coordination necessary for safe weapons handling. Her struggles with basic positioning suggested fundamental issues that extended beyond simple lack of experience. The breaking point approached as Emma's continued presence began affecting other participants' ability to progress through advanced curriculum designed for their skill level. The time and attention required for her remedial instruction reduced resources available for genuine advanced training, while her safety-related mistakes created concerns that threatened the program's carefully maintained standard. The institutional patience that had accommodated her enrollment was approaching its limits. Staff Sergeant Chen's morning briefing included thinly veiled references to minimum standards and appropriate skill levels that seemed directed primarily at Emma's continued participation. His professional courtesy remained intact while his message clearly communicated institutional expectations that she should recognize her limitations and withdraw voluntarily. The other participants understood the subtext and began preparing for her departure from the program. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison's individual assessment of Emma's progress painted a stark picture of fundamental inadequacy that made her continuation in advanced training professionally indefensible. His documentation focused on safety concerns and minimum competency standards that she had consistently failed to meet despite intensive individual instruction. The official nature of his evaluation suggested that administrative action might be necessary if voluntary withdrawal did not occur promptly. Chief Petty Officer Torres prepared alternative training scenarios that would allow the program to continue effectively after Emma's expected departure. His planning reflected professional adaptation to circumstances, while maintaining the advanced standards that justified the program's reputation and cost. The implicit assumption that Emma would not complete the program had become an accepted premise for continued instruction planning. The morning's most challenging exercise involved engaging multiple targets under time pressure, while transitioning between various shooting positions, a fundamental tactical skill that separated competent shooters from advanced marksmen. Emma's attempt to complete this evolution resulted in performance so spectacularly inadequate that even her most sympathetic observers questioned her suitability for any form of tactical training. The scattered pattern of her shots suggested someone fighting panic rather than implementing proper technique, while her movement between positions appeared awkward and dangerous to other participants in adjacent firing lanes. The electronic scoring system registered performance metrics so far below acceptable standards that achieving minimum competency seemed mathematically impossible within the program's remaining time frame. Staff Sergeant Chen's intervention during this exercise focused primarily on safety concerns rather than performance improvement, his priority shifting from instruction to damage control. Emma's apparent inability to maintain proper muzzle discipline,
while transitioning between targets created hazards that threatened other participants and violated fundamental safety protocols. The incident marked a clear escalation in the seriousness of institutional concerns about her continued participation. The post-exercise debriefing included frank discussions about minimum standards and appropriate skill levels that seemed designed to encourage Emma's voluntary recognition of her limitations. The instructor's professional courtesy remained intact while their message clearly communicated institutional expectations about personal responsibility for maintaining program integrity. Emma's apparent obliviousness to these diplomatic communications suggested either remarkable self-deception or stubborn refusal to acknowledge obvious inadequacy. The lunch break conversation among instructors revealed unanimous agreement that Emma's participation had become professionally indefensible regardless of financial considerations or administrative pressure. The safety implications of her continued presence threatened the program's carefully maintained reputation, while the impact on other participants' training progression violated professional obligations to provide effective instruction. The decision to recommend her immediate withdrawal reflected institutional consensus rather than individual prejudice. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison's afternoon conversation with Emma was designed to provide graceful exit opportunities while maintaining diplomatic relations with her father's defense contracting company. His professional courtesy masked institutional determination to resolve her problematic participation before safety concerns materialized into actual incidents. The conversation represented a final opportunity for voluntary withdrawal before administrative action became necessary. Emma's response to Morrison's diplomatic suggestions revealed either genuine lack of self-awareness or remarkable determination to continue despite obvious inadequacy. Her insistence on completing the program seemed disconnected from objective assessment of her performance, suggesting psychological factors that complicated straightforward administrative solutions. The mismatch between her perception and reality created additional challenges for institutional decision-making. The afternoon's training evolution was designed to be Emma's final opportunity to demonstrate minimum competency before formal administrative action became necessary. The exercise focused on fundamental marksmanship skills under controlled conditions, providing every possible advantage for successful performance. The instructors prepared documentation that would support their recommendation for her immediate withdrawal from the program. As Emma approached the firing line for what everyone expected to be her final performance in the advanced marksmanship program, the accumulated weight of 3 days' frustration and disappointment created an atmosphere of resigned inevitability. The other participants watched with mixture of sympathy and relief, anticipating the resolution of an uncomfortable situation that had diminished their own training experience. The electronic scoring system was calibrated to provide precise measurement of her performance, creating objective documentation that would support administrative decisions about her future participation. The instructors positioned themselves to ensure safety while observing her final attempt to demonstrate minimum competency for advanced tactical training. The moment had arrived when Emma Rodriguez would either justify her controversial enrollment or confirm every assumption about her fundamental inadequacy for military-style marksmanship instruction. The fourth day began with an atmosphere thick with unspoken tension. Emma arrived at the facility with the same nervous demeanor that had characterized her previous appearances, but the instructors noticed subtle changes that they couldn't quite articulate. Her equipment was arranged with slightly more precision than before, and her movement through the facility carried an almost imperceptible efficiency that contradicted her apparent inexperience. Staff Sergeant Chen had prepared what he privately considered Emma's final evaluation, a comprehensive assessment that would provide irrefutable documentation of her inadequacy for advanced tactical training. The exercise he designed focused on basic combat marksmanship principles under minimal stress conditions, offering every possible advantage for demonstrating competency. His expectation remained unchanged despite her marginal improvements during individual coaching sessions. The morning briefing included detailed safety protocols that seemed directed primarily at Emma's documented handling deficiency. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison's presentation emphasized proper muzzle discipline and trigger finger placement, with the patient repetition of someone addressing a persistent problem. The other participants understood the subtext while maintaining professional courtesy toward their struggling classmate. Emma's performance during the morning dry fire exercises revealed incremental improvements that remained far below acceptable standards for advanced training. Her stance had stabilized somewhat, though her grip strength still appeared insufficient for proper weapon control. The electronic training aids registered marginal progress in trigger control and sight alignment, though these improvements occurred from such a low baseline that achieving competency remained mathematically improbable. Detective Park observed Emma's slow progress with the professional interest of someone accustomed to evaluating human potential under pressure. Her law enforcement background provided perspective on the learning curve required for developing tactical shooting skills, and Emma's rate of improvement suggested someone fighting against natural instincts, rather than building upon existing foundation. The disconnect between effort and results reinforced assumptions about her fundamental unsuitability for advanced training. Marcus Webb's commentary about Emma's continued presence became increasingly pointed as the morning progressed. His references to lowered standards and participation trophies carried subtle implications about gender-based accommodations that created uncomfortable social dynamics among the participants. The instructor's failure to address these remarks directly suggested tacit agreement with his assessment of the situation. Jennifer Kim's competitive instincts manifested as barely contained impatience with training modifications, necessitated by Emma's remedial need. Her whispered observations about wasted resources and misallocated time reflected frustration shared by other competent participants who felt their advancement was being compromised. The social pressure created by these dynamics would have devastated most individuals, though Emma seemed oblivious to the growing resentment surrounding her participation. The transition to live fire exercises marked a critical juncture in Emma's evaluation process. Staff Sergeant Chen positioned himself to observe her performance with clinical detachment, his documentation prepared to record the final evidence necessary for her administrative removal from the program. The electronic scoring system was calibrated to provide precise measurement of accuracy and consistency, creating objective data that would support institutional decisions. Emma's first magazine of ammunition produced results that initially seemed to confirm every negative assessment of her capabilities. Her shots scattered across the target in patterns that suggested fundamental issues with sight alignment and trigger control, while several rounds missed the paper entirely and struck the earthen backstop behind. The electronic scoring system registered performance so far below minimum standards that even generous interpretation couldn't identify acceptable competency. However, something unusual occurred during Emma's second string of fire that caught the attention of observers who had been prepared to document her final failure. Her breathing pattern stabilized into the controlled rhythm that marked experienced shooters, while her grip and stance subtly adjusted into configurations that demonstrated unconscious competence. The transformation was so gradual that individual elements seemed unremarkable, though the cumulative effect created performance improvements that defied previous assessment. Chief Petty Officer Torres noticed the shift first, his SEAL training having developed sensitivity to tactical indicators that civilian instructors might overlook. Emma's movement between shots carried efficiency that contradicted her apparent nervousness, while her weapon handling displayed confidence that seemed inconsistent with documented inexperience. The inconsistencies were subtle enough to avoid immediate attention, though they planted seeds of doubt about previous assumptions. The electronic scoring system registered Emma's third magazine with results that created cognitive dissonance among observers who had witnessed her previous struggle. Her grouping tightened considerably, though it remained well outside acceptable parameters for advanced training. More significantly, her shot placement revealed understanding of sight picture and trigger control that seemed to emerge from nowhere, suggesting either remarkable learning acceleration or previously hidden competence. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison approached Emma's firing position with the intention of providing final remedial instruction before documenting her inadequacy for official record. His professional assessment focused on fundamental deficiencies that had characterized her performance throughout the program, though he noticed improvements that seemed inconsistent with her documented learning curve. The pattern of progress suggested someone accessing previously developed skills rather than acquiring new ones. Emma's response to Morrison's coaching revealed anomalies that would have alarmed anyone paying closer attention to behavioral detail. Her questions about advanced techniques seemed designed to maintain her facade of inexperience, rather than seek genuine instruction. Her body language during weapon manipulations suggested muscle memory that contradicted her verbal claims of unfamiliarity with tactical shooting principles. The morning's most revealing incident occurred during malfunction, clearing drills designed to develop responses to weapon stoppages under stress conditions. Emma's initial attempts to clear simulated malfunctions appeared clumsy and uncertain, reinforcing assumptions about her limited mechanical understanding of firearms operation. However, her recovery from these apparent mistakes demonstrated hand-eye coordination and spatial awareness that seemed inconsistent with genuine inexperience. Staff Sergeant Chen's observation of Emma's malfunction clearing technique identified subtle indicators that would have been invisible to civilian instructors. Her finger placement during remedial action followed protocols taught in advanced military courses, rather than basic civilian instruction. Her timing and sequencing suggested training that extended beyond anything she should have encountered in recreational shooting environments. The post-exercise debriefing included discussions about Emma's marginal improvements that created uncertainty about her future in the program. The instructors agreed that her performance remained below acceptable standards, though the rate of improvement suggested potential that might justify continued enrollment. The financial considerations of her participation complicated their assessment, while safety concerns remained paramount in their decision-making process. Emma's lunch break behavior provided additional clues about her true background for anyone observant enough to notice patterns that contradicted her civilian facade. Her choice of seating position provided tactical advantages that recreational shooters wouldn't consider, while her awareness of facility layout suggested familiarity with security protocols that extended beyond basic visitor orientation. These details were subtle enough to avoid conscious recognition, though they accumulated into a pattern that questioned official narratives. The afternoon session introduced combat marksmanship principles under simulated stress conditions, techniques designed to maintain accuracy when adrenaline and time pressure degraded fine motor control. Emma's initial attempts to implement these concepts appeared to confirm her continued inadequacy for advanced tactical training, though careful observers might have noticed that her failures seemed almost deliberately constructed to maintain expected performance level. Detective Park's professional background provided perspective on stress shooting that allowed her to recognize subtle indicators in Emma's performance. The pattern of her mistakes suggested someone controlling their responses rather than struggling with genuine inability, though this observation remained at the level of unconscious recognition rather than articulated suspicion. The cumulative effect of these anomalies created cognitive dissonance that Park couldn't quite resolve. Marcus Webb's continuing commentary about Emma's presence reflected growing frustration with institutional accommodation of inappropriate participants. His references to special treatment and lowered standards carried implications about administrative pressure that might override professional judgment. The social dynamics created by his remarks contributed to an atmosphere where Emma's continued enrollment seemed increasingly untenable. Jennifer Kim's competitive analysis of Emma's performance identified inconsistencies that challenged assumptions about her fundamental abilities. The precision of certain shots seemed incompatible with the scatter patterns that characterized most of her shooting, suggesting either random luck or deliberately concealed competence. These observations remained at the level of puzzled curiosity rather than formed suspicion. The afternoon's most significant development occurred during movement and shooting drills that required participants to engage targets while changing positions under time pressure.
Emma's attempts to complete these evolutions initially appeared to reinforce every negative assessment of her tactical capabilities, though certain elements of her movement suggested training that extended beyond anything she should have received in civilian environments. Chief Petty Officer Torres observed Emma's movement patterns with the analytical precision of someone trained to recognize tactical indicators under operational conditions. Her foot placement during transitions between shooting positions followed protocols taught in advanced military courses, while her weapon handling during movement demonstrated safety consciousness that seemed inconsistent with documented inexperience. The anomalies were subtle enough to avoid immediate attention from less experienced observers. The electronic monitoring systems that tracked all participants' performance during movement drills registered data points that created questions about Emma's official narrative. Her reaction times to command stimuli suggested training in responsive movement, while her spatial awareness during dynamic exercises demonstrated understanding of tactical concepts that recreational shooters rarely encountered. The objective measurements provided evidence that contradicted subjective assessments of her capabilities. Emma's performance during close-quarters engagement simulation revealed the most significant cracks in her carefully maintained facade. The controlled environment allowed her to demonstrate weapon handling skills that seemed to emerge from muscle memory rather than recent instruction, though she attempted to mask these capabilities through deliberate errors and hesitation. The balance between concealing competence and maintaining safety became increasingly difficult to manage. Staff Sergeant Chen's analysis of Emma's close-quarters performance identified technical elements that suggested training beyond anything available in civilian shooting programs. Her ready position and presentation from holster followed protocols taught in military and law enforcement academies rather than recreational courses. Her grip and stance during rapid engagement sequences demonstrated understanding of recoil management that seemed inconsistent with her documented experience level. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison's individual coaching session with Emma during close-quarters drills provided opportunities for detailed observation of her responses to advanced instruction. Her questions about tactical concepts seemed designed to maintain her civilian facade rather than seek genuine clarification, while her implementation of suggested techniques revealed understanding that exceeded her supposed knowledge base. The pattern of responses suggested someone accessing previously acquired skills rather than learning new ones. The day's final exercise involved precision shooting at extended ranges where environmental factors and advanced ballistics became critical consideration. Emma's initial attempts to engage distant targets appeared to confirm her inadequacy for advanced marksmanship training, though her adjustments for wind and elevation suggested understanding of external ballistics that recreational shooters rarely develop. The contradiction between her apparent struggles and subtle competence created cognitive dissonance among observant instructors. The electronic scoring system registered Emma's extended range performance with results that defied easy categorization. Her initial shots scattered widely across the target, suggesting fundamental issues with long-range shooting technique. However, her subsequent adjustments demonstrated understanding of ballistic principles that seemed inconsistent with her documented background, while her final shots achieved accuracy levels that approached acceptable standards for advanced training. Chief Petty Officer Torres's evaluation of Emma's extended-range shooting identified anomalies that would have been invisible to less experienced instructors. Her sight adjustments followed procedures taught in military sniper schools rather than civilian marksmanship courses, while her environmental awareness suggested training in field conditions that extended beyond controlled range environment. These indicators remained at the level of unconscious recognition rather than articulated suspicion. The post-training debriefing among instructors revealed growing uncertainty about Emma's true capabilities and appropriate placement within the program. Her performance remained below acceptable standards for advanced training, though the rate of improvement and subtle indicators of hidden competence created questions about her official narrative. The financial considerations of her enrollment complicated administrative decisions, while safety concerns remained paramount in institutional planning. Emma's departure from the facility that evening occurred under continued scrutiny from instructors who had begun to notice patterns that contradicted their initial assessment. Her behavior during equipment cleaning and administrative procedures suggested familiarity with military protocols that extended beyond basic civilian orientation, though these observations remained at the level of puzzled curiosity rather than formed suspicion. The accumulation of anomalies created cognitive dissonance that would require resolution. The transformation that occurred once Emma believed herself unobserved became more pronounced as the stress of maintaining her facade intensified. Her movement patterns shifted from nervous uncertainty to fluid efficiency, while her posture straightened into military bearing that contradicted her civilian persona. The psychological strain of constant performance was beginning to show cracks in her carefully constructed identity. Her evening routine included activities that would have surprised anyone who had observed her struggles during official training sessions. The precision with which she maintained her personal equipment contradicted her apparent unfamiliarity with advanced firearms, while her physical conditioning regimen suggested capabilities that extended far beyond recreational shooting requirements. The compartmentalization of her dual existence required increasing vigilance to maintain operational security. The fifth day arrived with institutional pressure mounting toward a final resolution of Emma's problematic participation in the advanced marksmanship program. The instructors had documented her marginal improvements while maintaining that her performance remained below acceptable standards for program completion. The subtle anomalies they had observed created uncertainty about her true capabilities, though professional obligations required adherence to established competency requirements. Morning exercises began with comprehensive evaluation protocols designed to provide final assessment of Emma's suitability for continued enrollment. Staff Sergeant Chen had prepared documentation that would support administrative decisions about her future participation, though his observations of subtle improvements had created questions about her ultimate potential. The exercise parameters provided every possible advantage for demonstrating minimum competency while maintaining safety standards. Emma's approach to the final evaluation carried subtle differences that only the most observant instructors noted. Her equipment preparation demonstrated efficiency that seemed inconsistent with her documented inexperience, while her pre-firing routine suggested training and performance optimization that extended beyond basic civilian instruction. These indicators remained below the threshold of conscious recognition, though they contributed to growing cognitive dissonance among professional observers. The morning briefing included emphasis on safety protocols and performance standards that would determine Emma's future in the program. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison's presentation focused on institutional requirements for advanced training, while providing diplomatic language that would allow graceful exit if minimum standards remained unmet. The other participants understood that this represented Emma's final opportunity to justify her controversial enrollment. Detective Park observed Emma's preparation with professional interest colored by growing puzzlement about inconsistencies in her performance pattern. The subtle improvements she had demonstrated seemed incompatible with the fundamental struggles that had characterized her initial training sessions, suggesting either remarkable learning acceleration or previously concealed capability. These observations remained at the level of curious speculation rather than formed conclusions. Marcus Webb's commentary about the evaluation process reflected his continued frustration with institutional accommodation of participants who failed to meet established standards. His references to objective measurement and professional requirements carried implications about administrative pressure that might compromise program integrity. The social dynamics created by these remarks contributed to an atmosphere where Emma's performance would face particularly harsh scrutiny. Jennifer Kim's competitive analysis focused on the technical requirements that would determine Emma's continuation in advanced training. Her understanding of marksmanship principles provided perspective on the improvements Emma had demonstrated, though she remained skeptical about the fundamental competence necessary for tactical shooting application. The evaluation would provide definitive resolution of questions about Emma's suitability for advanced instruction. The transition to live fire evaluation created an atmosphere of focused attention where Emma's every movement would be analyzed for evidence of competency or continued inadequacy. The electronic scoring system was calibrated to provide precise measurement of accuracy and consistency, while instructor observation would document technical elements that might not register on automated systems. The moment had arrived for final assessment of her controversial participation. Emma's initial magazine of evaluation ammunition produced results that seemed to confirm institutional expectations about her limited capability. Her shots scattered across the target in patterns consistent with her previous performance, while her weapon handling displayed the nervous uncertainty that had characterized her enrollment from the beginning. The electronic scoring system registered results that remained well below minimum standards for program continuation. However, subtle elements of Emma's performance during the evaluation began to create questions among observant instructors who had developed sensitivity to tactical indicators. Her breathing control stabilized into patterns that suggested training beyond recreational shooting instruction, while her grip and stance adjustments demonstrated understanding of recoil management that seemed inconsistent with documented experience. These improvements occurred gradually enough to avoid immediate attention while accumulating into performance enhancement that defied previous assessment. Chief Petty Officer Torres noticed the transformation first,
his SEAL background having developed awareness of behavioral changes that might indicate concealed capability. Emma's movement between shots carried efficiency that contradicted her apparent nervousness, while her weapon manipulation suggested muscle memory that extended beyond anything she should have acquired during civilian training. The pattern of subtle improvements created cognitive dissonance that would require eventual resolution. The electronic scoring system registered Emma's subsequent magazines with results that created increasingly pronounced contradictions with her established performance baseline. Her groupings tightened progressively, though they remained outside acceptable parameters for advanced training completion. More significantly, her shot placement revealed understanding of sight picture and ballistic principles that seemed to emerge from previously hidden competence, rather than recent instruction. Staff Sergeant Chen approached Emma's firing position with documentation prepared to record her final performance for administrative purposes. His professional assessment remained focused on minimum competency requirements, though he had begun to notice improvements that seemed inconsistent with her documented learning curve. The pattern of progress suggested someone accessing previously developed skills rather than acquiring new ones through current instruction. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison's observation of Emma's evaluation performance identified technical elements that raised questions about her official narrative. Her sight adjustments followed procedures taught in advanced military courses, while her environmental awareness suggested training in conditions that extended beyond controlled civilian ranges. These indicators remained subtle enough to avoid immediate recognition while contributing to accumulating evidence that challenged established assumptions. The morning's most revealing development occurred during timed shooting sequences designed to evaluate performance under minimal stress conditions. Emma's initial attempts appeared to maintain her established pattern of struggle and uncertainty, though careful observers might have noticed that her errors seemed deliberately constructed to avoid exceeding expected performance levels. The balance between concealing capabilities and maintaining credibility became increasingly difficult to manage. Detective Park's professional background provided perspective on stress shooting that allowed her to recognize anomalies in Emma's evaluation performance. Her mistake patterns suggested someone controlling their responses rather than struggling with genuine inability, while her recovery techniques demonstrated spatial awareness that seemed inconsistent with recreational shooting experience. These observations created questions that remained at the level of unconscious recognition. The evaluation's climactic moment arrived as Emma prepared for her final string of fire, the shots that would determine her continuation in the advanced marksmanship program. The accumulated pressure of 3 days' scrutiny had created an atmosphere where her every movement would be analyzed for evidence of competency or failure. The instructors positioned themselves to document her performance while maintaining safety protocols that had become increasingly important, given her documented handling deficiency. Emma's approach to the firing line carried subtle changes that only the most experienced observers might recognize as significant. Her posture had straightened almost imperceptibly, while her movement displayed confidence that seemed to emerge from muscle memory rather than conscious effort. The transformation was gradual enough to avoid immediate attention while representing a fundamental shift in her presentation of capability. The electronic scoring system prepared to register what everyone expected would be Emma's final performance in the advanced marksmanship program, the objective measurement that would determine whether her controversial enrollment would continue or reach its inevitable conclusion. The moment of truth had arrived when Emma Rodriguez would either justify institutional patience with her struggles, or confirm every assumption about her fundamental inadequacy for military-style tactical training. The crack of rifle fire echoed across the range as Emma's finger found the trigger for what should have been her final shot in the program. The 62mm round left the barrel with surgical precision, cutting through the morning air with a trajectory that defied every assumption made about her capabilities over the past 5 days. The electronic scoring system registered the impact with digital certainty that would shatter carefully maintained illusions. Dead center, perfect 10 ring. The first truly accurate shot Emma Rodriguez had fired since enrolling in the advanced marksmanship program. Staff Sergeant Chen stared at the electronic display with the expression of someone witnessing an impossibility. His documentation prepared for Emma's failure suddenly seemed inadequate to explain the contradiction between her established incompetence and this single moment of devastating precision. The shot placement wasn't luck or accident, it demonstrated understanding of ballistics, environmental factors, and weapon systems that recreational shooters spent years developing. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison lowered his binoculars with the slow deliberation of someone processing information that challenged fundamental assumptions. 23 years of military experience had taught him to recognize the difference between random accuracy and trained precision, and Emma's shot carried the hallmarks of professional competence that couldn't be explained by her documented civilian background. The silence that followed Emma's shot stretched across the firing line like a taut wire ready to snap. Other participants had witnessed the impossible transformation from scattered incompetence to surgical precision, their minds struggling to reconcile this demonstration of skill with 5 days of documented failure. The cognitive dissonance created by her performance demanded explanation that her official narrative couldn't provide. Emma's second shot followed within seconds, the report of her rifle punctuating the stunned quiet with another perfect center hit. The electronic scoring system registered identical precision that eliminated any possibility of fortunate accident, while her shooting position revealed the unconscious competence of someone whose muscle memory retained lessons learned under conditions far more demanding than any training environment. Chief Petty Officer Torres stepped forward with the measured pace of someone approaching a potentially dangerous situation. His SEAL training had developed sensitivity to tactical deception, and Emma's sudden transformation from liability to asset suggested capabilities that extended far beyond anything in her official file. The pattern of concealment and revelation carried implications that demanded immediate investigation. Emma's third shot completed a grouping that would have impressed competitive marksmen with decades of experience. The cluster of holes in the target's center ring demonstrated consistency that contradicted every assessment made during her enrollment, while her shooting technique revealed professional competence that seemed to emerge from nowhere. The transformation was so complete that observers questioned their own perceptions of her previous struggle. The electronic scoring system continued registering perfect shots as Emma emptied her magazine with mechanical precision that belonged in advanced military training rather than civilian instruction program. Each round found the exact center of the target with consistency that suggested not just competence, but mastery of long-range shooting principles that took years to develop through dedicated practice. Staff Sergeant Chen approached Emma's firing position with the cautious movement of someone entering unknown territory. His prepared documentation for her removal from the program seemed absurdly inadequate to explain the demonstration of skill he had just witnessed, while his professional experience demanded answers that her civilian facade couldn't provide. The questions multiplying in his mind required resolution that would challenge everything he thought he knew about Emma Rodriguez. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison's tactical mind processed the implications of Emma's sudden competence with the analytical precision that had kept him alive through multiple combat deployments. The pattern of deliberate failure followed by devastating accuracy suggested operational deception rather than learning acceleration, while her shooting technique revealed training that existed nowhere in civilian shooting programs. The contradiction demanded investigation that would expose whatever truth lay beneath her carefully constructed persona. Emma's demeanor during the shooting demonstration revealed subtle changes that observant instructors finally recognized as significant. Her nervous uncertainty had dissolved into focused concentration that belonged in sniper schools rather than civilian training facilities, while her weapon handling displayed confidence that came from muscle memory, developed under operational conditions. The transformation was so complete that her previous struggles seemed like elaborate performance art designed to conceal genuine capabilities. Detective Park watched Emma's shooting display with professional fascination, colored by growing understanding of the deception they had all witnessed. Her law enforcement background provided perspective on the dedication required to maintain such complete operational cover, while her tactical training allowed her to recognize elements of Emma's technique that belonged in military rather than civilian environment. The questions raised by this demonstration demanded answers that would challenge everyone's assumption. Marcus Webb's commentary about lowered standards and special treatment died in his throat as Emma's shots continued finding perfect center with mechanical consistency that silenced all criticism. His previous dismissal of her capabilities seemed not just wrong but embarrassingly ignorant of competence that exceeded anything he had demonstrated during his own enrollment.
The demonstration raised questions about institutional assessment procedures that had failed to identify such obvious competence. The morning sun caught the brass casings, ejecting from Emma's rifle as she continued the demonstration that was rewriting everyone's understanding of her capabilities. Each spent case landed with metallic precision, that seemed to emphasize the contrast between her current performance and 5 days of documented failure. While the smell of burnt gunpowder created an atmosphere where assumptions dissolved under the weight of observable evidence, Chief Petty Officer Torres positioned himself to observe Emma's shooting technique from multiple angles. His analytical precision focused on identifying elements that would explain her sudden transformation from liability to asset. Her breathing control followed protocols taught in military sniper schools, while her natural point of aim suggested training in field conditions that extended far beyond controlled range environments. The pattern of competence demanded investigation that would challenge her official narrative. Emma's final shots completed a grouping that would have impressed instructors at the most advanced military shooting schools in the country. The cluster of holes in the target's center created evidence that couldn't be dismissed or explained away through generous interpretation. While her shooting position revealed unconscious competence that took years of dedicated training to develop, the demonstration had transformed her from program liability into something approaching institutional asset. The electronic scoring system registered Emma's complete performance with objective measurement that eliminated any possibility of subjective error or wishful thinking. Her accuracy statistics had jumped from below minimum standards to levels that exceeded most participants' best efforts, while her consistency metrics demonstrated understanding of shooting principles that seemed to emerge from previously hidden expertise rather than recent instruction. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison approached Emma's position with the measured pace of someone entering a situation that required careful handling. His professional experience had taught him to recognize operational deception when evidence contradicted official narratives, and Emma's shooting demonstration raised questions that demanded answers her civilian cover story couldn't provide. The investigation that would follow this revelation would challenge everything they thought they knew about her background and motivation. Staff Sergeant Chen's documentation of Emma's performance would require complete revision to account for capabilities that contradicted every previous assessment of her competence. His prepared paperwork for her removal from the program seemed absurdly inadequate to explain the demonstration of skill that suggested professional training in advanced marksmanship principles. The questions raised by her shooting display demanded institutional response that would expose whatever truth lay beneath her carefully maintained facade. Emma's posture during the shooting demonstration had undergone subtle transformation that finally registered as significant to observers who had been trained to recognize tactical indicators. Her military bearing had emerged from beneath civilian uncertainty like a snake shedding its skin, while her weapon handling revealed muscle memory that belonged in operational environments rather than recreational shooting programs. The changes were so pronounced that her previous struggles seemed like deliberate performance designed to conceal genuine capability. The silence following Emma's shooting demonstration stretched across the firing line with the weight of unspoken questions that demanded answers her official narrative couldn't provide. The other participants processed the contradiction between 5 days of documented failure and sudden demonstration of professional competence, their minds struggling to reconcile observable evidence with established assumptions about her background and capability. Detective Park's professional background provided context for understanding the dedication required to maintain such complete operational cover, while demonstrating genuine incompetence that convinced experienced instructors of her limitations. The psychological strain of such sustained deception suggested motivations that extended far beyond recreational interest in advanced marksmanship training, while her sudden revelation of competence raised questions about institutional security that would require careful investigation. Marcus Webb's previous dismissal of Emma's capabilities seemed not just wrong but embarrassingly ignorant in the face of shooting performance that exceeded his own demonstrated competence. His commentary about special treatment and lowered standards had been revealed as projection of his own insecurities, rather than accurate assessment of her abilities, while his sexist assumptions about women in tactical environments had been exposed as professionally inadequate prejudice that compromised his judgment.
Jennifer Kim's competitive analysis of Emma's shooting performance revealed technical elements that belonged in national-level competition rather than remedial instruction program. The precision and consistency of her shots demonstrated understanding of advanced marksmanship principles that took years to develop through dedicated practice, while her natural shooting position suggested training that extended far beyond anything available in civilian shooting programs. The demonstration raised serious questions about assessment procedures that had failed to identify such obvious competence. The transformation in Emma's demeanor following her shooting demonstration was so complete that observers questioned their own memories of her previous struggle. Her nervous uncertainty had been replaced by quiet confidence that seemed to emerge from deep reserves of professional competence, while her military bearing revealed itself through posture and movement patterns that belonged in operational environments rather than civilian training facilities. Chief Petty Officer Torres stepped forward with the authority of someone whose SEAL training had prepared him to handle situations where official narratives collapsed under the weight of contradictory evidence. His approach to Emma carried the measured caution of someone entering unknown territory, while his analytical precision focused on identifying elements of her performance that would explain the deception they had all witnessed over the past 5 days. Emma's response to the growing scrutiny revealed additional layers of her carefully constructed persona beginning to dissolve under pressure. Her civilian facade had been shattered by her own demonstration of competence, while her military bearing emerged with increasing clarity as the psychological strain of maintaining deception reached its breaking point. The moment of revelation had arrived when operational necessity would override cover security that no longer served its intended purpose. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison's command voice cut through the stunned silence with the authority that came from decades of leadership in situations where truth mattered more than comfortable assumption. His directive for Emma to step away from the firing line carried implications that extended beyond simple performance evaluation, while his professional demeanor suggested institutional investigation that would expose whatever reality lay beneath her civilian cover story. The other participants cleared the firing line with the automatic obedience that came from recognizing command authority in action, their movements creating space for conversations that would challenge everything they thought they knew about their struggling classmates. The atmosphere had shifted from routine training to something approaching operational security investigation, while Emma's shooting demonstration had created questions that demanded answers her official narrative couldn't provide. Staff Sergeant Chen's preparation for documenting Emma's final failure seemed absurdly inadequate to explain the demonstration of professional competence that had just occurred on his firing line. His experience with advanced military training provided context for recognizing elements of her technique that belonged in special operations rather than civilian instruction program, while her sudden revelation of capability suggested deception that extended far beyond simple recreational interest in marksmanship training. Emma's hands remained steady as she saved her weapon and prepared for questions that would challenge the carefully constructed identity she had maintained for 3 years. Her shooting demonstration had been triggered by circumstances that made continued concealment impossible, while her revealed competence would demand explanations that her civilian cover story couldn't provide. The moment of truth had arrived when operational security would collide with personal safety in ways that would require choosing between competing loyalty. The electronic scoring system continued displaying Emma's perfect performance with digital certainty that eliminated any possibility of error or misinterpretation. The objective measurement provided evidence that would support whatever investigation followed this revelation, while her demonstrated competence raised questions about institutional security procedures that had failed to identify obvious deception during enrollment screening processes. Detective Park approached the situation with professional caution that came from years of law enforcement experience in situations where official narratives collapsed under the weight of contradictory evidence. Her tactical training provided perspective on the operational implications of Emma's revealed competence, while her investigative background suggested questions that would challenge every assumption made about her background and motivations for participating in advanced marksmanship training. Marcus Webb's embarrassment at being outshot by someone he had repeatedly dismissed created psychological pressure that manifested as aggressive questioning about the authenticity of Emma's demonstration. His challenges to her sudden competence reflected wounded pride rather than legitimate concern. While his previous sexist commentary had been exposed as professionally inadequate prejudice that compromised his ability to accurately assess tactical capability, Jennifer Kim's competitive analysis focused on technical elements of Emma's shooting performance that seemed inconsistent with any civilian training program available to recreational shooters. Her understanding of advanced marksmanship principles provided context for recognizing capabilities that suggested professional military training, while her curiosity about Emma's true background created questions that demanded institutional investigation rather than simple performance evaluation. The morning sun continued its arc across the Virginia sky as the advanced marksmanship program faced a crisis that would challenge institutional assumptions about participant screening and security procedures. Emma's shooting demonstration had shattered carefully maintained operational cover while revealing competence that demanded explanation. Her official narrative couldn't provide, creating a situation where truth would emerge regardless of personal consequences. Chief Petty Officer Torres positioned himself between Emma and the other participants with the protective instincts that came from recognizing someone whose revealed capabilities suggested operational background that might require security consideration. His SEAL training had prepared him for situations where cover identities collapsed under pressure, while his professional experience suggested that Emma's shooting demonstration was only the beginning of revelations that would challenge everything they thought they knew about her participation in civilian training program. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison's secure communication device buzzed with an encrypted message that would transform Emma's situation from training evaluation to something approaching operational security investigation. The timing of this communication with her revealed competence suggested institutional awareness that extended beyond local training programs, while the classification level of incoming information indicated that Emma Rodriguez might be connected to activities that existed far outside civilian marksmanship instruction. The message Morrison received contained photographic evidence that would explain Emma's shooting demonstration, while raising questions about her presence in civilian training programs that demanded immediate institutional response. The image displayed on his secure device showed a younger version of Emma Rodriguez in military uniform, her chest decorated with awards that belonged to the most elite levels of special operations rather than civilian marketing executives from Arlington, Virginia. Staff Sergeant Chen observed Morrison's reaction to the encrypted communication with professional interest that came from years of experience in situations where classified information changed operational parameters without warning. The sudden shift in institutional response suggested that Emma's shooting demonstration had triggered security protocols that extended far beyond simple training evaluation. While her revealed competence might be connected to activities that required careful handling rather than routine administrative action, Emma's recognition of the secure communication device in Morrison's hands triggered visible response that confirmed suspicions about her true background, while raising additional questions about her current operational status. Her civilian facade dissolved completely under the weight of revealed identity, while her military bearing emerged with clarity that belonged in operational briefings rather than civilian training environment. The moment had arrived when Emma Rodriguez would be forced to acknowledge the professional competence that her shooting demonstration had revealed, while institutional security would demand explanations that would challenge her carefully maintained cover identity. The advanced marksmanship program had become the stage for revelations that would transform assumptions about participant backgrounds while exposing operational realities that existed far beyond civilian training programs. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison's command voice carried new authority as he directed Emma toward the facility's secure briefing room, his professional demeanor suggesting institutional investigation that would expose whatever truth lay beneath her civilian persona. The other participants watched this development with growing understanding that their struggling classmate might be connected to activities that extended far beyond recreational interest in advanced marksmanship training. The electronic scoring system continued displaying Emma's perfect shooting performance as evidence of competence that had finally overwhelmed her ability to maintain operational deception. Her demonstrated skills belonged in military special operations rather than civilian instruction programs, while her revealed capabilities suggested training and experience that would soon demand official acknowledgement regardless of personal preferences or security consideration. The truth that Emma Rodriguez had spent 3 years concealing was about to emerge in ways that would challenge everyone's assumptions about strength, competence, and the hidden capabilities of those who serve in shadows while others sleep safely in their bed. The secure briefing room door closed with finality as Lieutenant Colonel Morrison faced Emma Rodriguez, the classified tablet in his hands displaying a military service record that would rewrite everything the advanced marksmanship program thought they knew about their most controversial participant. The photograph on screen showed Master Sergeant Elena Vasquez, 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, decorated with the Silver Star for actions in a classified operation that officially never happened. Emma's civilian mask finally fell away completely as she stood at attention before Morrison, her posture snapping into military bearing that had been hidden beneath 3 years of carefully maintained deception. The trembling hands that had struggled with basic weapon handling were now steady as stone, while her eyes held the 1,000-yard stare of someone who had faced death in places that didn't exist on official maps. Morrison read from the classified file with quiet authority that filled the small room. Master Sergeant Vasquez had been the most accomplished female sniper in Delta Force history, credited with neutralizing high-value targets across 3 continents while serving as team leader for Operation Dark Mirror. Her longest confirmed kill stretched beyond 2,000 meters, a shot that prevented a terrorist attack on a civilian population center, while saving her entire reconnaissance team from being overrun. The explosion that supposedly killed Elena Vasquez had been carefully orchestrated cover for her extraction from deep cover operations that had lasted 18 months behind enemy lines. The psychological trauma from extended isolation and constant threat of discovery had required specialized treatment that included complete identity reconstruction and gradual reintegration into civilian society under psychiatric supervision. Emma's voice cracked as she spoke for the first time without the nervous uncertainty that had characterized her civilian persona. The nightmares that haunted her sleep carried the faces of terrorists she had eliminated with surgical precision, while the prescription medications hidden in her apartment managed PTSD symptoms that threatened to overwhelm her carefully reconstructed psyche whenever she handled firearms. Her enrollment in the advanced marksmanship program had been therapeutic exposure designed to help her overcome the panic attacks that firearms triggered after her traumatic extraction. The deliberate incompetence was psychological protection against memories that threatened to surface whenever muscle memory tried to access skills that had kept her alive in the world's most dangerous place. Morrison's secure communication device buzzed with authorization from Pentagon officials who had been monitoring Emma's therapeutic progress through civilian rehabilitation programs. Her shooting demonstration had triggered security protocols because her revealed competence suggested readiness for potential return to operational status, though the decision would remain hers to make without institutional pressure or military obligation. Staff Sergeant Chen entered the briefing room with documentation that would officially acknowledge Emma's true identity while maintaining operational security around classified missions that remained sensitive to national security interests. His professional embarrassment at failing to recognize elite special operations competence was overshadowed by respect for the sacrifice she had made in service to operations that saved civilian lives. The other program participants waited outside the secure facility as institutional procedures processed revelations that would change their understanding of competence, assumptions, and the hidden service of those who protect American interests in shadow. Detective Park felt professional humiliation at dismissing capabilities that exceeded her own tactical training, while Marcus Webb faced the uncomfortable reality that his sexist assumptions had blinded him to expertise that surpassed anything in his military contractor background. Jennifer Kim's competitive analysis of Emma's revealed performance statistics showed precision that belonged in Olympic records rather than therapeutic rehabilitation programs. The consistency of her shots demonstrated muscle memory that retained capabilities developed through years of operational deployment, while her technical competence suggested training investments that represented millions of dollars in specialized instruction. Chief Petty Officer Torres briefed the assembled participants on security requirements that would govern their knowledge of Emma's true identity and operational background. The classified nature of her previous service meant that details of her military career would remain restricted, though her demonstrated competence had earned respect that transcended rank and service branch distinction. Emma's decision about her future carried weight that extended beyond personal preference to national security considerations that involved ongoing operations requiring her unique skill set. The therapeutic success demonstrated by her ability to handle firearms without psychological breakdown suggested readiness for limited consultation roles that wouldn't require full operational deployment but could provide expertise for training programs and tactical development. The Advanced Marksmanship Program implemented immediate changes in participant screening procedures to prevent future failures in recognizing concealed competence that might affect training effectiveness. Emma's case study would become required reading for instructors learning to identify behavioral indicators that suggested hidden military backgrounds requiring specialized handling rather than routine civilian instruction. Morrison's final conversation with Emma occurred as afternoon sunlight streamed through the briefing room window, illuminating a transformed individual whose civilian persona had been replaced by the quiet confidence of someone whose service had protected American lives in ways that would never receive public recognition. Her choice to decline return to active operations reflected personal healing rather than lack of patriotic commitment. Emma accepted a consulting position that would allow her to design training programs incorporating lessons learned from her operational experience, while maintaining the civilian identity that provided psychological stability. Her unique perspective on the intersection of advanced tactical training and therapeutic rehabilitation would benefit future operators, transitioning from classified service to civilian life. The other participants' transformation reflected broader institutional learning about assumptions, competence, and the hidden capabilities of those whose service exists beyond public recognition. Marcus Webb's request for private conversation with Emma resulted in genuine apology and commitment to examining biases that had compromised his professional judgment, while Detective Park sought mentorship opportunities that would improve her own tactical capability. Staff Sergeant Chen's after-action report documented systematic failures in assessment procedures that had allowed elite special operations competence to be dismissed as civilian inadequate.